Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about There's Someone Inside Your House. There's Someone Inside Your House is an American slasher flick that tells the story of a group of teenagers who are getting ready to graduate high school and move on with the next stage of their lives when they're unexpectedly rattled by the gruesome murder of one of their school's star athletes. This sets off a chain reaction of events in their small town in which one victim after another becomes targeted by the killer for their supposed misdeeds, so it's up to the group to figure out who's behind the killings and stop them before they end up becoming targets themselves. You can probably already tell that this movie isn't exactly original, and indeed you would be right. It pretty much plays out exactly how you'd expect, like with any other teen slasher flick out there, right down to the gory kills and the one-note characters. Makani is the main character of the group, and I thought she was okay as a protagonist for the most part. She's definitely better than all the other friends in her group, but that's mostly by virtue of the fact that she's the protagonist and thus has a lot more detail and backstory behind her compared to all the other characters. Makani is a character who is clearly running from something, but we don't quite know what. She's not native to the town that she lives in where the movie takes place, so it's interesting to see how little bits and details of her personal life begin to crop up, especially once they start to connect to the main story as it progresses. However, there are some things about her that don't make a whole lot of sense. There's this guy in her town named Oliver who she occasionally hangs out and hooks up with, and it's implied in the movie that he has some sort of past connection with her, but it's made clear later on in the movie as events progress that that association is nothing like what the audience would have expected, certainly from my perspective anyway. So in the end, I had no idea how Oliver was supposed to be important or be connected to Makani's story. The rest of the characters are barely worth mentioning. There's Rodrigo, who has a crush on Alex who has a crush on Rodrigo, Zach, who's living in his father's shadow and failing at school, Caleb, who's a gay football player, and then there's Darby, who's a trans / non-binary / whatever character the movie wants them to be. Now, don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the movie promoting diversity where it counts, but the characters are barely more than tokens. Just because your character happens to be black, or trans, or gay, or any other sort of diverse concept you can think of, that doesn't automatically make them good characters. The most important thing about any character is that they're written well and have clearly defined character arcs. Otherwise, the audience isn't going to care about their fates. And as far as this movie is concerned, every single teenager in this movie is about as bland can get. At the risk of sounding controversial at this point in the review, I do have to admit that I do believe that there is such a thing as being woke, perhaps even too woke, and this movie is definitely no exception. It goes way beyond the characters of the group that are trying to track down and stop the killer. There are so many social science and political concepts thrown under this movie's umbrella, it's enough to make your head spin. It addresses things like Nazi memorabilia, a girl having secretly participated in a white power podcast, various characters throughout the movie debate the race of the killer. The way all these things add up and compound on top of each other, it just feels a bit much. I wouldn't mind so much if it had shown like one or maybe two of these things and then kept mostly focused on the horror that's supposed to be taking place afterward, but instead it just throws one thing after the other, and the way they're all portrayed together is so corny and tacky to me. This movie suffers the same problem that Moxie did, which is another movie that I reviewed earlier this year. It tries to throw as many social concepts as it can think of under the sun in an attempt to try and shine light on them all without thinking as to why those things are important to the story in the first place. This isn't to say that I think diversity isn't important in film, far from it. I think it's great when movies can put a message out there, but the point that I'm trying to make is that if you're going to implement a message in a movie, it has to make sense. If you're going to portray a character as being different from others, make them be different. Show them actually exploring that side of their personality that makes them different, rather than just making them walking, talking bodies that go to the same football games and the same corn maze as everyone else. Just changing a character's skin color or sexuality isn't enough. Well, now that I ranted about that long enough, let's talk about the best thing this movie has going for it, which is the horrors of the serial killer and the kills that they commit. The overall entertainment value of the violence does help salvage this movie from its political nonsense to a certain extent. Honestly, the violence is pretty ordinary by today's standards. It mostly just shows the killer going around slicing and dicing people with a knife. So if you're a big horror fan like me, you might be disappointed by that, but it's still fun where it counts. The movie definitely doesn't shy away from the violence, and I like the massive mask gimmick that the killer uses as well. The killer wears a mask that's supposed to resemble whatever character they're trying to kill in a particular moment, and the mask is supposed to represent the dark side of that character that's catching up to them. The symbolism is there if you want to look for it, and the technical elements are in full swing. Great editing, great cinematography, great set design of all the rural American scenery, just a great looking movie overall. The sad thing though is that there's just not many kills to go around and enjoy. Off the top of my head, I can think of only 4 people that are killed in this movie, and for a movie that's supposed to be a slasher flick, that is very disappointing. Even more disappointing though is that it takes forever for the teens to start investigating the killings in this movie. They don't even do anything when the first character dies. It's not until the second one dies about a half hour after the movie starts that they finally get off their butts and start trying to figure out who the killer is, effectively meaning that the movie doesn't take place until it's halfway done, and that ruins the pacing for me. Overall, There's Someone Inside Your House is another run-of-the-mill teen slasher that could have been worse, but it could have been so much better than it is. If you're a fan of horror movies, particularly slashers, and you're looking for something new that'll whet your appetite, this movie might satisfy your craving, but only for a little while. I think the movie started off on the right foot, and the violence is entertaining in parts, but it all gets lost in a sea of social justice nonsense that in my opinion would have been better off being talked about in another movie. I can't really fault it, but I can't praise it either. It's just another one of many unremarkable slashers. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of There's Someone Inside Your House. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Turkish thriller, Grudge. Bye bye!